Hello and welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. My name is Lindsey Dyer. I am the Senior Director of Client Engagement with Digital Advisors, and I'm honored to be here today with an incredible group of people who work at the intersection of education, technology, and innovation. Thank you to Executive Director Tim Taylor of the SSDA, the Small School District Association, for this collaborative initiative, and for all of our panelists joining me today to speak to some of the most pressing questions on the minds of district leaders serving small school districts across the state of California. I want to introduce Digital Advisors briefly, and Digital Advisors is a K-12 technology consulting firm supporting school districts across the state with some of the most complex issues related to technology and innovation. So back to our panelists, I am pleased to introduce Anthony Thomas. Anthony serves as the Chief Technology Officer for Merced Union High School District and also a Senior Advisor for the Digital Advisors team. Welcome, Anthony. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Lindsey.
And next, I'd like to introduce Christy Novack. Christy is the Coordinator of Instructional Technology at Pacifica School District in Northern California. Welcome, Christy.
Great to be here.
Thanks so much. And Brian Olson. Brian Olson serves as a chair of the Cybersecurity Task Force for the state of California and brings a breadth and depth of expertise when it comes to cybersecurity considerations for the public sector as well as business. He's worked in cybersecurity for over 15 years. Welcome, Brian. And finally, I am pleased to introduce Stuart Packard. Stuart is the president of the SSDA and serves as superintendent of Buttonwillow School District. Welcome, Stuart.
Thank you, Lindsey.
Great. And to kick it off, I am going to send the first question over to Stuart. Stuart, from your perspective, what do you see on the horizon for technology innovation in education? What do you think is coming next beyond online learning and one-to-one computing?
You know, Lindsey, clearly where we're at right now is we're at a revolutionary stage in what has to happen with technology in our schools. Whether it be a small rural school, a suburban school, or an urban school, we are going to look different after this pandemic. There'll be a number of parents who, just because they can send their kids back to school, are not going to want to do that immediately for lots of various reasons. And they could be personal, they can be medical, they can just be the fear of what school looks like now. So it's going to be our job to make sure that we adjust as a school, as a district, to make sure that all kids' needs are met. And the way we're going to be able to do that is to bring in the pedagogy of teaching. And what we've done in Buttonwillow is we focused on that pedagogy as opposed to more programs. We were fortunate enough to be one-to-one last year. We were fortunate enough to be able to do a lot of things for our students so that when this school year started, we were able to get going. And a lot of that was planning, but a lot of that was also kind of luck that we had already decided to do some things. So we have some talented people in our school that are doing these things. And we're looking at not just a program, but the way we instruct kids. We mentioned learning pods. We mentioned the way that students are going to have to be in small groups. Learning is not going to take place with 32 kids, 24 kids in a Zoom meeting, a Google Meets, or whatever type of program is being used. It's got to be where there's a trust factor within the kids being able to have to work together, and that's going to come from teaching them digital citizenship. So there's a lot of things that we need to look at in the future as to how this is going to go and what it's going to look like, because schools have got to be prepared for change.
Well said. Thank you so much, Stuart, for kicking it off with that powerful sentiment.
Okay. Christy, you have anything to add on that topic?
Sure. I think I agree with your point about pedagogy over just tools. I think that the way we are approaching thinking and how we are educating students how to think is really important. To your point about learning pods and the small groups, the consideration moving forward in the future, the idea of developmental classes versus just strict age group as far as doing that, student interest groups, as far as for educational purposes. So examining why we have certain existing traditional structures in place to begin with is one thing. And then to your point about the types of learning, computational thinking skills to me is so important for personal and professional reasons. That type of thinking, especially in a time like this, right? Breaking something down, understanding, sifting through the information for key points. I mean, these are really important skills that should be emphasized and have a focus in our schools.
I agree with that so much. I really believe that we also have to realize that those soft skills that need to be taken place, where we're able to communicate with people. Those can never be lost. And you see that in businesses, especially large businesses that are in the large cities. My son's works for a tech company in Seattle. He's been at home since February of last year, and he's working with clients and all of that with his job, but they're not coming back until the earliest is January. So it's going to be very important that we continue to be able to work on those soft skills while still moving ahead from a technology standpoint and how we can conduct business, much as we're doing today. So if anybody have something they'd like to add to that kind of a thought there, so. Okay. Well, Anthony, what are 3 mistakes that schools make when it comes to developing that technology plan and a lack of plan for the future, especially?
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest things is when the technology plans, they used to be a compliance factor, right? For E-rate, when applying for E-rate, you had to have a technology plan. I think the biggest shift we see now is it should be based on instruction and pedagogy, not technology, right? So adopting like ISTE standards or those types of things and basing your plan on that, not devices, as you mentioned earlier, that we are kind of in a revolution, a digital revolution right now. So trying to predict those things is kind of obsolete, where if we focus on instruction, that instruction is going to be instruction, right? And pedagogy is going to be pedagogy. Then the other piece that I see is making it easy for everyone to read, saying the same things, right? So making it a 5-page document based on instruction. Then you have the board saying the same thing. You have staff saying the same thing, students saying the same things. And when you get everybody on the bus, that's the big piece, right? The last thing I would say is trying not to look too far into the future. Things are moving very quickly and rapidly. Making sure that your technology plan is a living document so that you can adjust it as you need. As we talk about pedagogy, are we doing asynchronous, synchronous, all these different things that are coming at us in lightning speed, having that flexibility to adjust as we go.
You use the term synchronous and asynchronous. I wonder how many people were using those terms, say in January of this year. So I know our teachers are like, okay, can I just say when I'm fully with the class instead of having to say synchronous and asynchronous? So, Brian, what about you? You have anything with that technology plan and how you can integrate cybersecurity?
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to echo what everybody's been saying so far, especially Anthony. Things are changing very rapidly, and there's significant exposures that are coming out due to these technology changes. We are seeing in the Central Valley of California, we are seeing one school district a week get breached. And in the neighborhood of about $300,000 in wire fraud that's being committed per week in the Central Valley here with school districts. So it's a significant problem. And as Anthony said, the old days of mapping out this plan years in advance, years ahead, those days are gone. We have to be agile. We have to be able to react quickly to changes because schools may open, schools may close. Governor Newsom is talking about, what do you say, the pandemic with the, COVID combined with the flu. There's going to be significant changes. We're going to have to pivot very quickly. The same thing is in the cyber world. We've got to be able to deal with these three threats very rapidly. Just like, and my biggest advice to school districts is involve security experts early. If you're baking a cake and you forget the sugar, It's really hard to add it back in after that cake is baked. Same thing with security. If you've got the security experts by your side and, giving you feedback on how to address student privacy and security early, it's a minimal add-on cost. If you do it later, it's a significant cost. So that's the main thing. Involve your security experts early. The days of your internal IT staff being able to defend and detect threats with, just antivirus, those days are gone. You've got to have this ecosystem of security to help you.
Brian, probably about 4 years ago, there was a gentleman, he's the former retired superintendent of Bonsall School District. His name's Justin Cunningham. And he and I were having some discussions, and he said, you know what? The cybersecurity is so crucial for the big districts, but what the reality is, it's the small districts, the medium-sized districts that don't necessarily have the tech expertise or the funding to pay for those people for cybersecurity. And he said, we've really got to make that a priority in smaller districts and at least get the word out on that. So I think that's very crucial to what this group is talking about today as well. How do you think about how a small school district is able to handle that?
Well, again, your organization, I think, is key to this. If we can come up with, and we're already working on some of these plans, some collaborative arrangements across districts. Districts historically do not share technology well, nor do they collaborate well. We have to break that barrier down, and we've got to build these associations like your small school district association that can sponsor these types of initiatives. So all the small schools can benefit with a minimal cost. That's really the strategy we've got to pursue.
Yeah, I totally agree with that in the sense that we really have to look at how we're moving forward with this. And there's going to have to be possibly that breakdown of the boundaries or the specific district boundaries. I know in Kern County, we're doing something with called the Kern Pledge, and we're utilizing some information. I believe Santa Clara County has used it. Who knew it? And we call it our Kids Data Program. And that is we are working with sharing data between districts and all that so that we can really identify what's going on and be able to do that. So good point, Brian. Christy, what kind of technology challenges have you seen that you need to meet and all that going forward?
So some current ones that we've experienced during this pandemic have been different ones, but one that I think many of us share is the access, connectivity, and devices. And regardless of how many students, one student is one too many. And so really the highlight of the digital divide has really come to the forefront now, even more so than ever. So we had challenges actually within that, identifying through our data who actually does have internet or who has devices. So that actually has been challenging. I know some of my other fellow districts have encountered the similar situation. We do collect when we have people originally enroll. We do ask them if they have internet, but that's ebb and flow. You could have internet 1 month and then you can't afford it. You could have a device and then it breaks. And so it is difficult for us to actually get accurate information in order to make informed purchases to help support our district. I know that there have been districts that have actively worked on either working with their internet provider or services in order to help generate heat maps to understand maybe different areas in your district that might have more connectivity issues. I know Monterey did something similar of that nature. And so how do we create and support continually access for everyone is a huge one. And so moving forward, a model example would be how can we look at our infrastructure and make mindful decisions for the future? So what is the nature of a mesh network, right? Those types of things that return on investment over time, right, would be optimal. Other issues or challenges is communication and just support. Communication is always a challenge, regardless, on an everyday balance. Now, when people have fear and there's a lot of emotion and there's a lot of uncertainty and there's a lot of just information back and forth and confusion, it can be very challenging to make sure that everybody has that same message. And so looking at how we are communicating, what tools we're using, that could integrate with our systems to make messaging more efficient and effective. That is a challenge that we have encountered, but we are also working on at the same time this year because we are doing a lot of infrastructure upgrades. So I would, as far as a model, is really understanding your systems and those really quick and flexible ways that you can modify and get messages out to all your families, including translations and things like that to help for that information. And then the third thing that we found that was successful that I think is really important during this time was, again, to the point of communication, but with our staff, we established summer working groups with parents, and we established summer working groups with staff. And we had 6 different groups: wellness, technology, curriculum, and it was truly collaborative. It really was successful. People felt that they all had a voice. And I think that's really important to remember, especially during a time of crisis, that all stakeholders are involved in conversations and certain decisions as well. So those are some of those challenges that we've met and that we are working to address.
It's so crucial for schools to be able to have this ability to work together, and especially in a small school district, for example, when you're talking about, we don't have all that staff development team. It really is the superintendent. In our case, we're very fortunate to have an extremely talented assistant superintendent in Heidi Witcher, and we're able to do some things that other smalls aren't. Just because of the skill sets, but those change from person to person when they come in a small district. And so we're trying to build that capacity of our teachers and realize that, the teacher is really crucial in this change. Because for me to say, well, you guys need to be doing this as superintendent, well, you know what? None of us were doing this 8 months ago, and now the teachers are. So they have a better understanding because they're dealing with this every single day for at least 7 hours a day, whether it's synchronous or asynchronous, which we talked about earlier. And I think also the school district, Brian, you mentioned schools working together. For example, we had all Verizon hotspots. Well, even though our school district is only 350 students, counting our preschool, we cover 256 square miles. And so that coverage is not going to be consistent. So we went to Maple School District, which was using hotspots that were from the county office, the Kern County Superintendent of Schools office, and they are letting us use those until our AT&T hotspots come in. Well, those 10 families, 10 students that are outlying, considerable distance from our school, are now not complaining about it. So I think that you mentioned the word pivot, you mentioned the word adjust, and I think all of us are agreeing that, we're no longer that 5-year plan that says, well, in 5 years, this is where we'll be. We need to adjust immediately on that. Anthony, you have anything to add on all that?
Absolutely. Obviously, connectivity and lack of resources, budget, all those pieces that we just talked about. Our district's doing something very similar. What you're doing, we have Verizon also, but we have a few outlying areas where we're sharing with a feeder school district of devices so that their devices work in those areas, our devices work in their trouble areas. Great ideas. But I'd like to bring it back to something you said earlier. As we talk about staff, right? Developing a baseline and standards, right? Like, so what is the very basic minimum do staff members need to know in a digital environment, right? Like, what I mean by that is, if we as a district are adopting Zoom, Google Meet, whatever platform, or if we're doing Google Apps or Microsoft, all those are really irrelevant. But whatever we're adopting, making sure every staff member has that baseline knowledge of that platform, making sure that we're focusing professional development so that we get everybody to a certain level, not getting caught up in app of the week or software of the week. It's really easy to get caught up in these shiny softwares and apps, but making sure that all staff members are at this equal level playing field for our students, right? That's one of the biggest challenges I think I've seen, in the pandemic. We've been one-to-one for 10 years, but now all of a sudden, when you put everybody at home and you start to see all these other challenges, you start to realize where some of those holes are. And I think some of those holes are developing very clear baselines of what is the very basic we need someone to do, and then tailoring professional development based on that.
You know, Anthony, you make a good point, because we're talking about different types of programs and all, and kind of moving along with some things that are very crucial is that the staff has to also have that understanding. You know, I began teaching a long time ago where you plug the Apple IIe into the wall, and everybody went back and they had the little green screen, and you were able to pull something off. And then the Mac LC came out, and that changed things. That was a game changer for my classroom, which tells you I'm getting toward the end of my career right now. But now there's so much more to worry about. What happens with how do you work with the parents in the background? How did the Zoom bombing, the spyware? Brian, you mentioned a district in the Central Valley that had been a pretty severe attack on cybersecurity. How does all this fit in when we're talking about bandwidth and cybersecurity and all?
Yeah, the main thing is you cannot expect your internal IT staff to be competent in this anymore. They can't do it. And if you're expecting them to do it, you're doing them a disservice, because the threat landscape changes daily. You have to engage your ecosystem, your experts, to help you along. It's not hugely expensive. It's something that's well worth the risk. It's well worth the money to do it. And basically, core to all of that is some type of a risk assessment, something like that. There are great resources out there. Companies are bending over backwards to help school districts these days. And Anthony, to echo what you said, there needs to be a consistent minimum standard in the security world, similar to what you're saying for teachers and their knowledge. For your IT staff, they need to be asking these questions, okay? And there's probably, 10 or 15 of them max, but they need to have that baseline of knowledge and know where they need to engage the experts. There's a minimum that needs to be done in all of this.
Thank you so much for tuning in to part 1 of this Tech Talk, brought to you by the Small School District Association and Digital Advisors. Digital Advisors support school districts with both short-term needs and long-term goals, including distance learning, connectivity, supporting your remote students and staff, technology bond planning, cybersecurity, student and teacher safety, and more. Please contact Digital Advisors at info@daexpertise.com or learn more about us via the website at www.daexpertise.com. Thank you so much, and we'll be sharing part 2 of this Tech Talk with you shortly. Thank you.